I kind of think that if we asked people, who said, "I came to bring fire to the earth," there are very few who are not students of the New Testament think that it was Jesus. It doesn't really sound like him, does it? Blessed are the peacemakers. Yep, Jesus said that. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Yes, he said that as well. And that sounds a bit more like the Jesus that we know. But Jesus is a bringer of fire. Or, like the legendary Prometheus, bringing fire to humanity and getting into terrible trouble for it. Or as an agitator, a troublemaker, stirring things up, trying to cause division. But there are times when we need an agitator. That last part, Jesus the agitator, is how he explains the image. He came to set people at odds with each other, he says, to divide household, father against son, and daughter against mother. Jesus is the divider, the sharp knife of decision and commitment that splits folk up, based on whether they line up with him or whether they're against him. He's like a lightning rod. He not only brings fire to the earth, but he also takes fire from others and fire from those who hate him for what he has done to the minds of their friends and family. Jesus compares his work to a baptism. He's got a job to do, he says. And the only way to do it for all is, and to do it at full bore, no holds barred, pedal to the floor, is the way to get on with it. There's going to be an almighty explosion, he says, and he'd just as soon go ahead and have done with it because it won't be much fun getting through it. So what do the agitators look like? The original firebrand in the Gospel of Luke is John the Baptist, speaking to the crowds who hiked out to the Judean wilderness and who camped out to listen to him preach and be baptized. He told them that judgment was imminent. The axe was already chopping at the roots of the trees, and pretty soon the trees not bearing fruit were going to be cut down and thrown into the fire. What must we do? He asks the crowd. Give away your surplus to those who have none, he said. If you are storing up the world's goods, then you are not a fruitful tree. You have to be rich towards God, putting your goods and chattels where God's heart is, with the poor, or you'll face the fires of God's wrath. John's message echoes the preaching of Old Testament prophets like Amos and Isaiah. You hear echoes of John in Jesus' preaching in Luke when he tells his followers to sell their possessions to feed the poor. Jesus' followers lived up to these precepts when they left everything behind to go out on a mission for and with him. And later, when they structured their common life in Jerusalem so that nobody ever went hungry or lacked a place to live. True, it was a message of fire and judgment, and one that continues to make those of us who have more than we need profoundly uncomfortable. But although Jesus, the agitator's message, stirred things up and upset families and communities, it also created life for and within the community. Jesus sent out other fire throwers in Luke. He sends the 12 out in chapter 9. And then in chapter 10, he sends 70 more, instructing them to heal the sick, cast out demons, and tell everybody that God's kingdom had come near. You'll be like lightning rods, he says. Some people will appreciate what you say and happily take you in and feed you. In other places, you won't even get the time of day. Your message will fall on deaf ears. But he says, don't worry about it. Walk out into their streets and shake off the dust from your feet and say, we're leaving your dust here as a witness that we were here and that you didn't bother yourselves. But no matter what you think of it, God's kingdom will come, and you've been well warned. There's a wee distinction here. The followers of Jesus are fire throwers, but only in the sense that their words and deeds make plain the choice that people have to obey God or not to obey him. It isn't your job, said Jesus, to curse those who won't listen or to call down fire from heaven on them. Your job is to make the truth plain, and if folk won't listen, make that plain too. The number one commotion in Luke is, of course, Jesus himself. He's an equal opportunity pest. Like John, he tells the rich that they must give away their stuff to the poor. But then, he's not very sympathetic to the ordinary man who wants his fair share of an inheritance. He eats with the sinners, and that makes the pious uncomfortable. But then, he goes on to eat with the pious too. He fusses at Simon the Pharisee for not providing water so he could wash up before dinner. But then he shows up unwashed for dinner at a second Pharisee's house. Jesus is a wee bit of a gadfly. He has the knack of spotting the places in our lives that are not under God's control and then shining a spotlight on them. We've got to cooperate. Use whatever metaphor you like. A garden overgrown with weeds, a house with dark corners full of piled up junk and cobwebs, a half-dead tree badly in need of pruning, if it is ever to be fruitful. Whatever image we choose, the work involved in putting things back to rights is substantial. And the longer we put it off, the harder the task will become. But then, let's add in another layer of complexity. The house and the garden and the tree, they are not passive, but they are active. They can resist cleaning and weeding and pruning, or they can take part. And it is the task of the agitator to try to convince them that something has got to be done, and done soon. But an agitator won't be able to make all the changes. If we are the garden overgrown by weeds of materialism, the agitator can warn us where we're headed. But we must assist in uprooting what threatens to choke out our faith. If we are the house where racism and sexism have created impenetrable barriers against some, the agitator can shine the light on the junk that blocks access to all. But the long, hard work of clearing and moving and rearranging will fall to us ourselves. If we are the tree whose living branches bear little fruit because so much energy is used in holding up dead and useless branches, an agitator can make us aware of the problem. But we can resist the efforts to prune away what fails to produce life and fruit unless we're willing to take part. And the result can be division and conflict, whether we take part or not. 2 questions. There are the pushy, noisy, fire-eating, throwing advocates for change, trying to gain a hearing with us. And there are those who don't tell us anything. And to which ones are we listening? And I think that each one of us should resolve to cooperate better so that change is not too slow in coming. And we've got to ask, to which ones have we shut our ears? And let us rethink that stance, knowing that our natural inclination is to resist anything that makes us uncomfortable. And none of us like to feel uncomfortable. Jesus was a real agitator for change. And is it possible that those who want change speak with his voice? And that's a question we've all got to ask ourselves. And it may be or it may be not, but we'll never know unless we openly and honestly consider the thoughts of the Lord Jesus Christ and his criticisms. And we certainly can't do that with our fingers in our ears. What we've got to do is listen to Jesus. And not only that, hear what he and his disciples had to say. And may God add his blessing to these thoughts based on his most holy word.